American Minute at 1-888-USA-WORD.
VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
And welcome to Crosstalk, coming your way from VCY America. Ladies and gentlemen, there are numerous debates going on as to how far we can delve into scientific research and still hold to a system of ethics. Some say it really doesn't matter as long as it's for the common good. I mean, take, for instance, embryonic stem cell research. Some will claim that, well, since aborted baby tissue would otherwise go into the trash, it's fine to use it for experimentation. Others will contend that the use of fetal body parts from aborted babies in vaccines and treatments are also okay if others are being helped by it. Did you know that there are labs that are creating human embryos solely for experiments? These embryos are usually destroyed once research is complete. Also, did you know that aborted fetal tissue is still used in some medical studies, and this research often happens without public awareness and certainly without public consent? And what about the use of AI? AI tools are shaping choices in healthcare, pregnancy, and even research. I mean, if it's left unchecked, this can target those who are disabled, can target the unborn, even target older adults. So when headed down a pathway of very concerning technologies, that's where we're headed right now. I mean, genetic screening and gene editing, cloning, artificial wombs, three-parent embryos, even human-animal chimeras. Where do we draw the line? When is it time to put the brakes on scientific research to protect ethics and to prevent us from going down the pathway of eugenics? Well, that's our topic here today on Crosstalk. We'd like to welcome to our studio Dr. Tara Sander-Lee, founding board member of SALT. That's the Science Alliance for Life and Technology. She is a science advisor and consultant who earned her Ph.D. in biochemistry from the Medical College of Wisconsin. She has over 30 years' experience in public policy, academic research, and clinical medicine with an emphasis on the cause of pediatric disease. She's provided policy advice to legislators and policymakers and has given testimony before the U.S. Congress as well as state legislatures. She was a member of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Secretary's Advisory Committee on Infant and Maternal Mortality. And her training includes a fellowship in cell and molecular biology from Harvard Medical School and Boston Children's Hospital. Friends, she was appointed faculty member at the Medical College of Wisconsin, where she directed a research lab investigating congenital heart disease in children and served as scientific director of molecular diagnostics at Children's Hospital of Wisconsin, as well as vice president at Charlotte Lozier Institute. She's published in various medical journals and textbooks, including contributing to the book Choose Life, Answering Key Claims of Abortion Defenders with Compassion. And Dr. Sander-Lee, so good to have you here on Crosstalk.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So you're a founding member of SALT, that's Science Alliance for Life and Technology. Just give us an overview, if you would, of this organization.
Absolutely. So we are a new collaboration of scientists, expert scientists, and policy experts they're committed to guiding science with strong ethical standards, science that is going to protect and value every life. We know that human life begins at fertilization, sperm-egg fusion, and that God created every life. So we want to promote science that is going to honor and give dignity to that human life, no matter what the scientific goal is.
You know, so often when we went through COVID and so many things, we kept hearing the phrase, follow the science. But for some reason, people are not following the science when it comes to when life really does begin.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's absolutely true that the human life begins from the moment of fertilization, and that there is human life. That is a human life that is alive, that has a unique genetic component, and that it is only when that sperm and that egg come together, where they are not complete, but then when they come together, that is a complete genome, a living human being. And so, yes, science that ignores that fact or that tries to exploit that fact or tries to destroy human life in the process for advancements, that is absolutely wrong.
How is science shaping the future of humanity?
So science is shaping, I mean, there is nothing, we are very pro-science, but we are also very pro-life, right? Science offers incredible promise. So it is good to want to heal the human condition. But science fails when research and advancements rely on the intentional harm and destruction of human beings. That's where we see. So science has this incredible ability to discover the world around us, the world that God created, but it's going to fail if it relies on the destruction and harm of human beings in the process.
Yeah, and so that's where many struggle, is determining how do we distinguish between that which is ethical and that which is not ethical.
Right. And where we stand with that is that destroying any human life, whether inside or outside the womb, at any stage, is going to be unethical or wrong, right? So we remind people that science can progress ethically, that we can do this where life is respected and science moves forward. And there are just, there are so many bioethical challenges right now. I mean, we see that in the cases of reproductive technology, some people think, well, it's IVF, right? In vitro fertilization, that's must be pro-life because babies are made, right? But there are some serious pitfalls when it comes to IVF because in order for that technology to continue, we are seeing that human beings are being destroyed in the process. Millions and millions of human beings are being destroyed. We see that we are continuing, as you mentioned earlier in the introduction, experimenting and exploiting human beings in research, human embryos, human fetal tissue from abortions. We're now in a place right now where scientists are trying so hard. There's this quest that they're trying so hard to eliminate disease, and they're trying to stop human suffering, that they are willing to well, we already know that they're willing to kill babies inside the womb through abortion once they discover that the baby has disease. But we're seeing in vitro fertilization these eugenic practices where they're discarding all these embryos in order to they're eliminating people in order to eliminate disease. We're seeing that they're exploiting these human beings, they're experimenting on them, they're manipulating them, trying to better understand disease and trying to develop cures, but in the process, they're just doing these unethical experiments. So they've actually figured out a way to now make human beings without sperm and egg, these human embryos. Gene editing, right? So, okay, well, once we identify a human embryo that doesn't have the genes that we like, can we actually change that, right? So this is ushering in this whole era of we want to promote technologies and science that will heal the human condition, but at any cost. And they're not stopping to think about ethically, what does that mean? And what it means in a lot of these cases is that millions and millions of human beings, human embryos, are being destroyed, they are being manipulated, and they are being exploited.
Wow. And that's something you're warning about, and also really encouraging the whole industry of science, medicine, to have guardrails put on through all of this research. And some would ask then, you mentioned IVF, some would say, well, are you against giving parents hope? Because IVF is giving parents hope. How do you respond to that?
I would say that IVF, initially that IVF was meant to be for struggles that were struggling with infertility and that there was no other option, right? But it is now quickly swept into this area where it is now couples are swept into this with any indication or delay in getting pregnant naturally. There's this whole other area of restorative medicine that is often not even considered to actually treat the underlying condition. IVF is a workaround. It doesn't get to the root cause of the problem. And so as a biotechnology that is used to actually then, conceive these human beings outside the womb, and it's often seen as a quick fix to do that and to control in vitro fertilization. But what people don't understand is many of the pitfalls, right? So it fosters eugenics because often these embryos are, once they're generated, they are quickly put into boxes of whether they are considered to be better or, whether they're considered good embryos or not so good embryos, quality embryos, because they want to increase survival, where there's nothing wrong with that. But what ends up happening is then they screen these embryos for diseases or even now genetic traits, and they're being sold that they can now pick their baby.
We want blonde hair and blue eyes.
Absolutely. We want a baby with a high IQ, that's going to be tall. I mean, this is happening right now. Right. And so it's no longer an issue of just trying to pick to choose a baby that's not going to have it. I mean, it's wrong already that if you're thinking that a baby with disease is somehow not worth living, right? That's what's wrong. Right. And so it fosters eugenics. It's very inefficient. So we actually know that based on a new study just from 2026, that the efficiency is somewhere between 7 and 22% because now they have all these other add-on technologies like this pre-implantation genetic testing that they do, right, to screen these embryos. And as a process, then we're seeing that hundreds of millions of embryos have been dying in the process. We know that even with choosing what they consider to be the highest quality embryos, IVF is leading a trail of death and destruction. Over 90% of embryos from IVF either die, are destroyed, are discarded, or are frozen. So conservative estimates are that over 100 million human beings have died from IVF, and over 1.5 million embryos are actually frozen in the United States. They're abandoned to the freezer because they do not have the genetic composition that the parents want, or they've completed their family, and so now these embryos are not given a chance to life.
And others, you were talking about weeding out genetic disorders of some extent, and I don't recall what country it is, you may know, but a country not long ago was boasting that we have solved the Down syndrome problem, and that is because they have, sought to destroy any child suspected of having Down syndrome in the womb, and therefore they're not giving birth to children with Downs.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's Iceland and Denmark, actually. So once they we know that non-invasive prenatal screening is a way to very early on in pregnancy, while the baby is still developing, to look for cells, basically of the fetal cells that are actually that you can detect just by taking a blood sample from the mother. So once they perform these screens, as you mentioned,
are those 100% accurate?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And those screens also were meant for women that were supposed to be at high risk of carrying babies with disorders such as Down syndrome. And it was a way to just help these parents plan, right? But just the opposite happened. What happened is that now they screen all women. The American College of Gynecologists, ACOG, actually recommends that all women, regardless of the risk, that they be screened for Down syndrome, but the list is getting longer and longer. They're just screening for many, many more. And what they're finding is that the more women that they screen that are actually of low risk, the chance that the test is wrong goes higher. So it's like flipping a coin. There's a 50% chance that test could be wrong if you are testing a woman that is low risk of having a baby with Down syndrome to begin with. Wow. So they're absolutely inaccurate. We know, like you said, this is where people think that it's okay to eliminate disease by eliminating people. And we see that even with these tests in the United States, that the population of Down syndrome has gone down. There's a study that suggests that it's well over 30% has gone down just by these screens. So what's happening now, like that's while the pregnancy is continuing, right? We're already using these tests, these very eugenic tests. But now in vitro fertilization is just, well, let's just do it earlier now. Let's not even give these, embryos a chance. Let's just put them in let's donate them to research of it, they'll be destroyed. Let's just throw them away, or let's just abandon them to the freezer.
Friends, you're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America. Dr. Tara Sander-Lee with us today. Our topic is life-affirming science. And we're going to take a break, and there's so many other issues we're going to be getting in today as well, like fetal tissue research and about using aborted fetuses in vaccinations and other topics as well. So, friends, stay with us. We'll be back in just 1 minute. You're listening to Crosstalk on the VCY America Network.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, scientist with the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, where do blind cave fish come from?
Chris, it seems that some fish get trapped in caves living in total darkness. They have no use for their eyes, thus their eyes atrophy and no longer develop. But some of these fish are virtually identical to fish that live in lakes and streams nearby which do have eyes. I've long wondered what would happen if you took some of these blind fish and raised them in a lit environment. Would their eyes begin to develop? The fish still have the genes for eyes, but they're never switched on. Thus, the eyes are never expressed. I've often wondered if they're interfertile with the sighted fish. This seems to be a good research project, but as far as I know, the blind fish are protected, and no such research has been done. Chris, fish were created on day 5 of Creation Week, and that happened back in Genesis.
For more information, you can find us on the web at www.icr.org.
You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America. With us today, Dr. Tara Sander Lee, founding board member of SALT, that's Science Alliance for Life and Technology. And friends, just judged by what we've covered in the first segment already, we are just going to scratch the surface on so many different areas here. But Dr. Sander Lee, you've got a website for your organization as well, that you've got a lot of information there. Share that site with us if you would.
Absolutely. We encourage you to go to our website, saltforlife.org. That's SALT, and then the number 4, life.org.
Okay, and we'll be sure to repeat that as we go through the broadcast here as well. And I'd like to get into this area of embryonic stem cell research. I know there was a letter from the National Institutes of Health announcing a policy change concerning the funding and use of fetal tissue research. But I also saw a story just last week where members of Congress sent a letter to NIH, to the director, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, urging him to permanently end the agency's funding of human embryo destroying stem cell research and to terminate the NIH Human Embryonic Stem Cell Registry. So what was the announcement in January? And as to the practice going on right now, what do our listeners need to know?
Yeah, so there's a lot of information here, so I'll try to summarize. So first, there's human fetal tissue research. Okay, so this is where the body parts, the eyes, the hearts, the brains, the lungs of preborn babies that die through the horrific act of abortion are then harvested and sold to desiring scientists for experimentation. It's controversial and has a history of ethical misconduct. We wrote the seminal paper on this in Issues in Law and Medicine back in 2020, our group from SALT. And so what's really important to understand, there's a lot of, we encourage you to go to that manuscript on the history of this. But that in and of itself, there were grants that were being funded by the NIH, okay? There were about 77 grants at the time that were being funded by the NIH. What they announced on January 22nd was that effective immediately, the NIH funds would not be permitted for research using human fetal tissue from elective abortions anymore, okay? So it doesn't mean that human fetal tissue research has stopped. It just means that the government is no longer paying for it. People can still use private funds. They can still use state funds in order to conduct this horrible, horrific research that exploits aborted babies, okay? Then separate from that, there is human embryonic stem cells. So when I talk about embryonic stem cells, this is derived from the culture of very early human embryos. They're only about 5 days old. Okay, so they're living human embryos, and as we were talking about earlier, they are generated from in vitro fertilization. It's for people that don't want them anymore. They can donate them to research. So that's where embryonic stem cells come from. These embryonic stem cells can be produced in very large numbers, and they're used to make what's called these strains. And then these cell lines have been available for NIH-funded research in what's called this NIH Human Embryonic Stem Cell Registry. So for every human embryo that was alive and living and it was destroyed, it was used to create a cell line that then research could go in. They could use federal funds to get access to these cell lines and do studies, okay? And so what happened then with that is that, yes, we are also saying this needs to stop as well. So at the same time they announced the ending of federal funds for human fetal tissue, they then said, okay, we're also going to put a pause on new submissions to this NIH Human Embryonic Stem Cell Registry. And we're going to request information on reducing reliance on these. So they sought public comment, and that was actually due last week, Friday. So SALT submitted a response. We encouraged many people to submit comments. So we are eagerly awaiting them to review all the comments that they've received, because I can tell you right now, this research is not needed. This research is not needed to do human fetal tissue research, human embryonic stem cell research. This research has been shown to be absolutely It's destructive, of course, but it is we don't need it because there are so many other ethical alternatives that are available now, okay? And this research needs to stop. It is proven wasteful, ineffective, and just for one example, human-induced pluripotent stem cells are probably one of the best examples of non-embryonic human stem cell research that has vastly surpassed embryonic stem cells in basic research, clinical advancements, and federal funding. These cells can actually be produced from what's called somatic cells, like a skin cell. You can take a skin cell from a human being and you can reprogram it to behave like an embryonic stem cell. And this is an amazing scientific accomplishment that actually the investigator Yamanaka won the Nobel Prize for in this incredible technology. So that's one ethical alternative. Adult stem cells are another one that are being used now from living donors and birthing tissue such as cord blood that treat people regularly. Over 1 million people have survived because of the use of adult stem cells, right? And there's no human being has to die because of this, right? So that's why we celebrate the announcement made by the NIH to end federal funding of research using tissue from elective abortions. This was really important, and we also are excited to hear that the NIH has put a pause on the embryonic stem cell registry, but we strongly encourage this to go even further. We want all of it to stop. We want to see we want that registry to close, and we want all of this to stop because it's not needed and it's not necessary.
And so that begs the question, have there been any positive outcomes, any positive medical breakthroughs as a result of embryonic stem cell research?
No, and it absolutely has not. That's the thing. It's been absolutely wasteful. It has not resulted in any clinical therapeutics that are available now that are helping people.
And so there will be many who will say, well, what about if it's for the common good of mankind? What if we're going to discover that cure for cancer or something of that matter, the benefit of mankind for the future? How do we balance that with ethics?
I think it's pretty clear that the ends never justify the means, right? So if we are saying that we want to develop a therapy that's going to rely on the destruction of another human life, that's absolutely unethical. That we don't do that for any other therapy, right? Why would we destroy one human being for the sake of another?
I'd like to move on to another topic, and that's vaccines and the use of fetal tissue as well. But what is the current practice?
So the current practice for vaccines is that there are some vaccines that are made using, that are either developed, produced, or tested using cells that were isolated and taken from an aborted baby long time ago. And so they were multiplied into many cells of the same kind. And so these cells are so deeply entrenched in the scientific community. This is like the HEK293 cells, okay?
That's human embryonic kidney.
That's exactly right, because they were taken from an aborted baby, from the human embryonic kidney of that aborted baby. So these can be grown indefinitely and further multiplied, and while they're sometimes used for science experiments, they are sometimes used to test, produce, or manufacture these vaccines. But I want to make the important point that fetal cell lines are not the same as fetal tissue. So when people point to fetal cell lines and say, well, we need fetal tissue because we need to make vaccines. Well, that's not true at all. So fetal tissue requires the ongoing destruction of human life. Okay, so a baby has just been aborted, and that baby is immediately harvested and dissected for its parts and sent off to laboratories, okay? Fetal cell lines are deeply entrenched into research labs, and while it's wrong, right, because they don't rely on the ongoing destruction of fresh human fetal tissue, they still are tainted, right? They're tainted with that aborted baby from years ago. They're historic. And so we also want to see this come to an end, but any of these decisions that the NIH are making right now do not even touch on the fetal cell lines.
And are there certain vaccines that you are able to name that are part of where the fetal cell lines have been used in the vaccine itself, or the development or the testing of the vaccine?
Yeah, absolutely. So there were some COVID vaccines that we know that were used for the testing, the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccines. While they were not used in the development production, they were used in the testing. We know that the chickenpox vaccine is another one that is produced using these fetal cell lines. And I think what's so important that people understand is that most vaccines don't use these cell lines. Most of them use non-human cells. So vaccines can be developed, produced, and tested ethically using no cells or cells from animals, insects, chicken eggs, and yeast. We don't even need these. So a lot of these manufacturers just go back to the old way of doing this. This is really an old, archaic way. The modern way is totally different, and we actually found that it actually works better. The shingles vaccine is the perfect example. It used to be produced in fetal cell lines. It has now been switched over and then used, and they use non-fetal cell lines to be able to produce it, and it's actually working better. So there are examples. So there's so many examples that we don't need these.
So how is a person to know? I mean, whether going in to get a shot, how will they know whether or not this is coming from a fetal cell line or not?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the FDA actually has a website that tells you what all the vaccines are, and so you want to look for some of these words, right? So if you go to the FDA website and the current FDA approved vaccines, you have to look for the word fetal cell line. You have to look for HEK 293. There are other cell lines that like I'm totally escaping the name, but you can go to the FDA. You can ask your doctor. Your doctor should absolutely know. You can come to SALT. Send us go to our website, salt4life.org. You can contact us and you can ask us, and we will tell you before you go and talk to your doctor.
Friends, again, that website is SALT, the number 4, and then life, salt4life.org, salt4life.org. And we're talking with Dr. Tara Sander-Lee here today on life-affirming science. And as we're talking about vaccines, there are alternatives of vaccines as well that somebody can't, if they want to be vaccinated, that would not have a morally, ethical, put them in a position where they wouldn't have to make a choice that would violate their convictions?
Are there vaccines? There are some examples, yes. So like when you're...
alternative vaccines.
Yeah, alternative vaccines. So there are, it's totally escaping me, but there are some examples when it comes to the COVID, that one is pretty, there's some level of taintedness, and that's where I think it has to be clear that if you're trying to ask yourself, okay, am I trying to avoid a vaccine that was produced with fetal cell lines? The answer is yes. There are going to be examples of that. But if you're asking, can I avoid vaccines completely that have never touched an aborted fetal cell in their testing or any part of it or research? The answer is no.
Wow. You mentioned COVID shots that taking place there, mRNA. We're seeing its increased use and experimentation. Any concerns there?
So when it comes to the mRNA vaccines, that is definitely a new technology that is taken off quickly, and we saw that with the COVID vaccines.
Right.
Absolutely. I actually think, when we were at the Lozier Institute, we actually put together a really a deep dive into the science of the COVID vaccine so that people could understand the science behind the mRNA and how that was doing. Our focus at that point, was to focus on, was it made with fetal cell lines or not? So that's really was our focus.
Okay. Well, friends, a quick break here. When we come back, we're going to bring up another topic, and that is artificial intelligence. And is this leading us down the pathway of regret? We'll be back in just 1 minute. You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America.
For over 200 years, the American judicial system has upheld a standard so strong that a person's very life can be ended based on this level of confidence. A verdict supported by evidence that is beyond a reasonable doubt. Did you know there is evidence demonstrated beyond a reasonable doubt that we have a creator? Most are unaware of it because it has been censored from textbooks. Now, you can have this information at your fingertips. In the beautifully illustrated hardcover book, Have You Considered? Evidence Beyond a Reasonable Doubt, Bruce Malone and Julie Von Vett provide a series of unique devotions presenting evidence for every day of the year that points to the Creator. It's written in an easy-to-read format so that young and old can learn. Have You Considered is available for a donation of $18 or more from VCY. Call 1-800-729-9829.
This is Crosstalk on VCY America. Dr. Tara Sander Lee with us in studio today. Our topic is life-affirming science. Life-affirming science. And I hope you've written down their website, salt4life.org. Salt4life.org. And do you have an email list yet on there that people receive releases and so forth if they go to your website?
Yes. So if you go to our website, you can sign up to stay informed. We have a newsletter. Our inaugural newsletter just came out recently. So please sign up for information and postings and wait for it to stay in touch if you have any questions.
And friends, you may be listening and you may have a background in the medical field as well, or know those who do, who are concerned about this matter of ethics, and get signed up. You'll get the latest information, and they've got quite a team of experts behind this as well. That is salt4life.org. Let's get into this matter of artificial intelligence as well, and I know that this I see the advancements happening so quickly. It's leading us down a path I believe our society is going to regret. It's advancing so very quickly. But comment on some of the use of AI tools when it comes to the area of medicine and how it can be utilized in positive ways, protecting life and protecting us from going down a corridor that leads to eugenics. I mean, that's really where this pathway is leading.
Yeah. So AI, it's an incredibly complex and ethical issue. And so when it comes to using AI in a positive way for medical use, I think one of the ways to look at that is probably cancer is one of the areas where I see that really advancing. To use it in a way, I worked for years in a pathology department. And so, I used to have these slides of tissues, diseased tissue, and the pathologist would look through the scope very carefully and try to understand the diseased tissue, right? So now we are looking at a way where AI can actually analyze all this tissue. It can analyze data, the genomics, at such a large scale to maybe help us see things that can't be seen with the naked eye, associations between disease and maybe the genomics or the tissue pathology and the disease. So it really is an incredible way, I think, that it can be used to help to understand cancer and moving forward, with detecting cancer and treatments. But when it comes to some of the scary parts of AI, what we've just seen with SALT alone is how artificial intelligence is being used to do machine learning on large data sets to foster this eugenic practice of embryo destruction from IVF. So, for example, if a couple comes in and they have 20 embryos and they're trying to decide, well, which ones are we going to transfer, which ones are we going to freeze? Hopefully they don't ever consider discarding them, but what happens is which ones are they going to choose first? There are these companies now that are saying, well, we can actually screen your embryos using AI to see things that to help to predict whether your baby is not only going to have disease like that what's called a monogenic disease, like Huntington's disease or cystic fibrosis, but we're going to use AI to try to predict if your baby's going to have what's called polygenic disease, a disease that is really complex to begin with, okay? So polygenic diseases like heart disease, Alzheimer's, type 2 diabetes, cancer, schizophrenia, Parkinson's. So what it's doing is you take a biopsy of the human embryo at just 5 days, and they screen the entire genome of the embryo, and and they sequence the genome of the embryo, and then they use these large AI data sets. They use AI to basically then compare the embryo's genome to those that we know have the disease. And then they try to predict whether these babies are going to have some of these really complex disease, which the thing is, these complex disease, yes, they're polygenic, but they're also based on environment, on a person's diet, on, so many other complex factors that so what's happening is that, just to give you an example, then once there's a company that is right now in New York called Nucleus Genomics that is marketing this IVF Plus, which is this using this AI to predict whether this baby is going to have some of these polygenic diseases like heart disease. And they have signs all over the subway system. Have your healthier baby. This is IVF done right. Did you know that IQ is 50% genetic? These babies have great genes. Pick your baby. Have your best baby. And so what they're doing is they're marketing this, and then they're telling your parents, okay, you have all these embryos. We're going to help you decide. So I just read this letter to you that they say, dear future parents, now you can see your future child's health, traits, and potential before pregnancy even begins. So then they give them, they say, choose the best embryo for you, and then they present these like you're buying a baby off the shelf, right? Like with ingredient lists. So I'm just going to read these to you. So they say, okay, here's embryo 1. It's a boy. It's going to have blue eyes, brown hair. We think there's a low chance of type 2 diabetes, but he's going to be tall, but we think he's going to be pretty intelligent, but there's a high chance of autism, right? Then you have this other embryo that's going to have this color of hair and eyes and this risk of type 2 diabetes. And so what's really scary is that this combination of embryo screening at the large-scale genetic level combined with AI and then is being used to just, score these babies like there's like giving, they're giving them a test and then saying, well, these babies are good and these babies are bad. And so there's so many limitations. I'm just going to, the National Human Genome Research Institute says polygenic risk scores will always be probabilities, not certainties. So these tests are incredibly controversial, unreliable, and eugenic. Some of the keywords that you'll hear is like IVF plus, pre-implantation genetic testing, or at the polygenic level, PGTP. And it's just, at a level of, ethically, it's so wrong on so many levels because they're attempting to eliminate some people, their genes and their traits from the reproductive pool. They're claiming that some people have good genes that are better human beings and deserve life, right? They're treating these human beings like, they're treating these embryos like products and not the living human beings that were created by God. Like God, these are people that are created in the likeness of God, right? So, and I think there's this just, they want to try to achieve this perfect health, no disease, avoid suffering, but in the process, they're leaving this trail of death and destruction because all these babies that have been screened out, because for whatever reason, because they have a disease or they don't have an undesirable trait, they're getting cast into the trash, they're being frozen, or they're being sent off to research labs. And so it's just...
and this is being done as we speak?
This is being done as we speak. There are about a handful of companies in the United States, big tech, that are doing these tests right now. And it's really scary. I mean, this is, even the MIT Technology Review said that this type of embryo scoring, genetic testing on embryos, and this way, being sold as a way to let parents pick their future baby's best traits, is happening now, and MIT Technology Review said that it was one of the top 10 breakthrough technologies in 2026.
My. Friends, you're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America, and I'm so glad Salt for Life has come into existence and keeping us informed, but also addressing these issues and being a voice for that which is moral, right, ethic, having ethics in medicine and science here today. I'd like to open our phone lines. Our number here to Crosstalk, 800-733-9829, 1-800-733-9829. If you have a question for our guest today, Dr. Tara Sander Lee, again, the website salt4life.org, and the 4 is just the numeric 4, salt4life.org. And taking your calls today, questions you have or a brief comment, 800-733-9829. As you were talking about creating this superhuman, I just happen to think of, going back to Genesis, we shall be as gods, here, and it's like we're trying to create this superior race, and it's like what Adolf Hitler wanted, and Planned Parenthood, the founder, Margaret Sanger, wanted to, employ certain people should not be having children, and it just puts a scare down your spine as to where this is going.
It does, and it's, this is really humans playing God. We are creating human beings in man's own image.
Mm-hmm.
God is being ignored.
Yeah.
And I totally agree, and I think back to the early 1900s when they used to have these better baby contests. And they used to have these fitter family fairs where they used to give awards and certificates to babies who they considered to be the perfect baby. And they did this all in the name of health, right? They said, well, we just want healthy babies. What's so wrong with having healthy babies? What's so wrong about, not wanting a baby with disease? Well, there's nothing wrong with wanting a healthy baby, but not at the expense of then saying, well, then some people are lesser than because, God does not make mistakes, right? All people are created in the likeness of God. And we are not, our identity is not in our abilities and our age or how long we live, right? Our identity is in Christ.
Right.
And so, I think people are trying to look at health and longevity and trying to eliminate suffering. That's become their savior, right? Christ is our savior, right? We don't have a health or DNA problem. We have a sin problem, and we can't outrun death, but people are trying to. That's what's happening.
They are, and yet from the moment we are born, we begin the death process. I mean,
That's
it's
right.
appointed unto man once to die, after this the judgment. Friends, our telephone number to Crosstalk, 800-733-9829. That's 1-800-733-9829. Let's go to Greg in Chandler, Arizona. Greg, you're on the air.
Yes, doctor. I would like to know, is there an attenuated vaccine for COVID-19? I was doing some research in the beginning, and it was a company, and I never heard. That's not an RNA.
It's not an mRNA vaccine?
Yes, exactly.
So you're wondering if there's another vaccine out there for COVID that's not an mRNA vaccine?
Yeah. I think the term is attenuated. In other words, I think that's you give a person a little version of it, and then your immune system naturally works. I think that's what it means.
I'm not familiar with that one, but I can tell you, there are a lot of vaccines that were definitely in production during the time of COVID, and some of them, passed on, some of them didn't, but they were made with. If you're concerned about the not using aborted fetal cell lines, there's many vaccines that are, made in insect cells or no cells are used at all, right? And so it's a really important question, and feel free to send it to SALT, and we can do some more investigation and research for you.
And also, I'll just mention in a few weeks, we will be having Barbara Lowe Fisher on the program from the National Vaccine Information Center, and they delve a lot into research of vaccinations as well on so many different fronts. But thank you so much for the call here, Greg.
Thank you.
Great. And again, the website salt4life.org. Our phone number to Crosstalk is 1-800-733-9829. That's 800-733-9829. We're going to take a break, and we'll come back to more of your calls here in just a moment. But Dr. Tara Sander Lee is a founding board member of SALT. That stands for Science Alliance for Life and Technology, and certainly concerned about having ethics in the matter of science and medicine, and their organization is advancing that very thing. But we'll come back to your calls and more information following the break. Again, this is Crosstalk. Our number 800-733-9829.
For the Worldview Report, I'm Brennan House. Our website's worldviewtube.com. We need to get back to the Bible, particularly when it comes to the issue of evangelism and what it means to preach the gospel. Sadly, many people are being told today, well, you don't know if the person you're talking to is even ready to hear the gospel yet. How do you know they have been regenerated? They have to be regenerated before they can be saved. They have to be born again before they can be born again. You never see that taught in the Bible. Over and over, the passages, believe on the name of the Lord Jesus Christ and thou shalt be saved. It's over and over. Charles Spurgeon addressed this in 1863, quote, if I am to preach faith in Christ to a man who is regenerated, then the man being regenerated is saved already. And it is unnecessary and ridiculous thing for me to preach Christ to him and bid him to believe in order to be saved when he is saved already being regenerate, end quote. Folks, don't be hindered. Preach the gospel. I'm Brennan House.
You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America. The number to Crosstalk, 800-733-9829. Dr. Tara Sander Lee with us in studio today. And let's go to Amy in Woodbury, Tennessee. Hi, you're on the air.
Hi, thank you for taking my call.
Mm-hmm.
I was just going to say my dad was an OBGYN. He passed away this year on Easter.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. But anyway, all of that to say, there was a point in his career when he dropped the obstetrics part of his career and he became a urogynecologist and started teaching. And the reason for that was that malpractice insurance became so high because people wanted, you to essentially create, this baby that, was, like something you got off a shelf, They wanted it to have blonde hair and blue eyes and, be a certain height. And if they didn't get that, then sometimes they would sue the physician because he didn't deliver on their request. And so my dad, being a strong Christian, was just like, you know what? The malpractice insurance isn't worth it because this is anti-God. This is anti-Christian, and I refuse to be part of it.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. I just wanted to share that.
Great. Thank you for doing that, and thank you for the call here, Amy. That really puts a lot of doctors in that area of a dilemma. And if a child does have a disability, lawsuits, but, well, you didn't warn us that this was going to happen or that it would be a possibility that this would happen.
Yeah, and I think this whole area of polygenic testing is just going to make it any worse. This whole utopian idea that a parent is saying, well, I'm expecting almost like a perfect baby, right? And then all of a sudden the baby develops breast cancer, right? Or the baby doesn't do as well on the baseball team as they thought because it was supposed to have all this athletic ability, right? I mean, it's just like the pressure that this is putting on children, but also, like you said, but the doctors, all of a sudden they're not delivering the baby that somehow the parent thought. And that uniqueness of the child, that every child created in the womb is a precious child of God.
Fearfully and wonderfully made.
Absolutely.
As we see in Psalm chapter 139. Let's go to Fred next in Hawthorne, Wisconsin. Hi, Fred, you're on the air.
Hi, I'm an engineer. I took a course in AI in 1990. It's been around a long time. My question is, can AI be used to control AI to follow certain rules and regulations?
Yeah, can you put guardrails on AI is the question.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, there are so many problems with AI, and especially in this area of polygenic testing. And I think that what you just hit on an issue, because AI machine learning on you have to train the predictor using the existing data, right? You basically have to train the AI on what to do. And there is intrinsic bias to that because these are humans. We're not perfect, and we're training AI. And I think what we're also seeing is that it never will have the statistical power too with minority groups. So AI is so powerful in and of itself, but we have to remember, but it's not all powerful. God is in control.
Amen. Thank you for the call. We've got Kirk calling from Durand, Oklahoma. Kirk, you're on the air.
Yeah. How are you?
Fine. Your question or comment?
Well, I just wanted to comment. The last caller, he asking about the COVID vaccine, and was asking if it was a COVID vaccine that was not the mRNA vaccine. And I just wanted to say that Johnson & Johnson makes one, and it was just the regular vaccine. I looked into it because if I was forced to get it for some reason, that's the one I was going to use. And not everybody has it. You would have to call around, but there were a lot of places that were offering it.
And wasn't fetal tissue an issue with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine? Doctor?
Yeah.
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 I know during the time when they were forcing everybody to get, I know that was an option, and I had called around.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you for the call here. Let's go. Nancy in Fairview, Texas, our final call here today.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to know if she knew anything about the CT angiogram, including AI along with it. I found a company here in Dallas that does it, and they charge like $6,000 compared to just a regular CT angiogram that's maybe $1,300. Does it add that much benefit? They talk about you can measure a lot, have a lot of different measurements with AI, the parameters and such.
Well, our guest deals more in the bioethics aspect of things, so this would not be an area that you have actually studied, is it, Doctor?
No, it's not.
Yeah.
But a great question, though. I know there's a lot of questions out there about how well does this technology actually work, and is it worth the price?
Thank you for the call. But your involvement with the AI aspect is raising alarms that this way that we are going right now. I mean, there are those who are looking at 3-parent embryos, even combining human and animal DNA together.
Yes, that's exactly right. So we're seeing that just the desire to want to manipulate these embryos, and there's this goal of wanting to figure out a way to actually grow human organs so that we can solve the transplant problem. And if we could do that, maybe we could live forever, right? Yeah. And so what they're doing is they're growing these human embryos, what they call these human embryo models, right? And what's crazy is that they want to continue to grow these longer and longer. We already know that they can make these embryo models and they can be growing with beating hearts. But people are on record saying that they want to grow them up until like 70 days after fertilization. 70 days is in the second trimester of pregnancy, right? We have fully formed eyes. Yeah. So yes, there's a lot of strange things going in. You said the human-animal chimeras, where they actually want to take human embryonic cells and grow them in animals so that they can then try to, again, create
humanized mice, and on it goes.
Yes.
But we're down to just a minute. What would you like to leave with our listeners today?
What I would like to leave with the listeners today is that ethical science can move forward. When human beings at all stages of life are given the dignity they deserve, then science and technologies can progress ethically to heal and not harm, to offer maladies that help the human condition without intentional destruction or exploitation of any human being, and to offer treatments that can be accepted by more Americans, like we talked about with the COVID vaccine. This is a major concern, any vaccine. So this is why we want to help people understand this can be a very complicated issue. So we encourage you to go to saltforlife.org, reach out to us. We want to help to equip you. We want to inform you. We want to serve as a resource for you, so that if we don't have that we can answer your questions to some of these very complicated technologies that are coming forward and emerging.
Our guest today, Dr. Tara Sander Lee. And Doctor, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
And friends, these are important issues here today. And again, you can reach out on their website to get more information, salt4life.org, salt4life.org. And sign up for their newsletter. They just put out their maiden newsletter, and you'll be able to stay informed on the critical issues that confront them, that confront us as well. God bless you, friends. Thanks for joining us today on Crosstalk.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Tape Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208, or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.